Hey guys, this is Jennifer Brave, the founder and owner of Facets Relational Care. Recently I did a brief video on a perspective that I wanted to offer about what integration really is. And I wanted to follow up on that with just a couple of videos to give examples about ego versus the self, because that's an important thing to understand when we're talking about the idea of integration, which I will reiterate from that video isn't about changing behavioral patterns, and it's not about learning new ways of thinking or coping with emotions. It's really about having that revelation that none of those things really matter, because fundamentally, under all of that, there is a self that's perfect, a self that doesn't need saving. And when you can get in touch with that self, what you'll find is that you automatically integrate. Or in other words, you automatically start to flow with the way that the universe works, and especially with the way that you naturally are as a person without all of the hang-ups that tend to come with personality. And so I wanted to give just a couple examples of what that could look like. Today I'm going to talk about control and conformity. So you might be living in ego if you are trying to control, and if you're really concerned about conforming. To attempt to control something is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's not always about ego, because we are intelligent beings. And I mean, it's really not even humans. Some animals too demonstrate will and a desire to control things, and they take steps to control outcomes and circumstances in their environment. Humans are the same way. So it's not necessarily that having a will or a desire for a particular outcome or taking efforts to control a circumstance to go a certain way is entirely ego. That's not the case. That is part of the natural self. It's ego when the control becomes something that you're doing against the grain of the way things actually work. So life has certain patterns. The universe, if you will, works in certain patterns. The self knows how to flow with all of that without resisting the change. And the self knows how to apply its will and to control, if you will, by going with the grain instead of against the grain. So if you are finding yourself in a situation where you're really having to exert a whole lot of effort to perhaps avoid a certain change that you really don't want to have happen, or where you're trying to control the behavior or emotions or thoughts or expressions of another person, those are indications of ego, because those are things that come with the natural flow of life. They're things that you move with. And there's wisdom in learning how to decide what you can and can't control. In other words, where your will as a human being is actually applicable. One of the things that I like to say is, if it's taking like a whole lot of effort, you might want to step back and examine whether or not you're going against the grain or with it. With that being said, it can be kind of tricky to assess that sometimes, because sometimes making really big changes or standing up against, for example, an organization that perhaps isn't living up to the promises that it's made to a certain group of people, sometimes it's necessary to step in and make those changes, because making those changes and correcting those situations in the grander picture is part of the flow of life. That's how life corrects itself. Life gets fucked up and then it heals itself. And human beings and our ability to make changes in social order, again, just for an example, is part of the flow. It's going with the grain, even though individual instances can look like it's going against the grain. Let's use nature as an example. Again, there's nothing wrong with control. Sometimes a degree of control has to be applied because it helps with the flow of nature. For example, if you take an ecosystem and there is one particular animal in that ecosystem that's thriving, perhaps over thriving, and it's taking over the majority of the ecosystem, then that species of animal, that population would need to be eliminated to some extent. And so, for example, that's why you have, like here in Texas, we have wild boars, and we've had certain years where the number of wild boars has become so large that they were destroying a lot of the vegetation that we have here. And when that happens, the state of Texas will create certain time periods where they will allow people to just hunt them. And I mean, just kill as many as you want to kill. And it helps bring the population back under control so that the ecosystem as a whole can thrive. If you want another example, think about forest fires. Those are something that happen naturally in nature. Forest fires are very, very necessary. They can be devastating, especially, I mean, in instances like California when you live so close to them and they spread so easily. But if we take that out of the equation, a forest fire is necessary for the ecosystem of that forest, because burning down all of the larger trees and the things that are taking up the majority of the sunlight creates room for new plantation to grow. And so forests thrive and get bigger due to forest fires over time. So that's nature's way of controlling the growth and the flow of something that's very, very natural. So those are examples of natural types of control found in nature. We're not eliminating the natural order of things. We are just controlling within the natural order of things to keep them flowing the way that they're meant to. And that's something that the self can do. That's not something that comes from ego. So in instances where you're finding that you are attempting to control an outcome, or again, to control perhaps a person or a group of people, and control, by the way, doesn't necessarily look like giving orders. It could be passive-aggressive manipulation. It could be persuasion. It could be education. It could be anything that is an assertion of some kind that you're hoping will alter an outcome. There are a lot of different things that it could look like. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are wanting to alter a certain outcome, something that you may ask yourself is, if I were to let this go, and if I were to allow this to continue and just to kind of go with the flow of it, are there things that I could do that would work within the process of this that could still create a certain outcome for me that I think would be beneficial? You don't necessarily have to buck the entire system. I'll give you another example. Consider the ending of a relationship of some kind, just some sort of significant relationship. Let's use the example of a romantic relationship because that's typically where we see the example that I'm about to use. A lot of people, when a relationship ends, have a hard time accepting it and not necessarily moving on, but allowing themselves to let go and live in this new reality that this person is not playing this role in our lives anymore. And a lot of people will take efforts to try to salvage relationships that just naturally are falling apart. Perhaps two people are growing apart. There is nothing wrong with making an attempt to salvage a relationship, because sometimes relationships don't necessarily need to end, they just need some repairing. But for example, if two people were growing apart, that's a natural process in life. And sometimes in the anxiety of losing someone that we've been so attached to, it's easy for us to attempt to control that by perhaps passive-aggressively manipulating that person, sometimes even begging that person to stay, sometimes even changing who we are, lying about what we think, what we want, how we feel, in an attempt to be more desirable to that person. And in instances like that, that type of control is going against the grain. That's ego. That is something that we do to avoid the pain that comes with abandonment and rejection, because that sort of pain is something that assaults the ego. The self doesn't take on that pain because the self understands that validation doesn't come from that other person. That other person is a part of life and is a part of the universe just as you are. And just because the relationship changes and they leave and they go on, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a void in you. It just means that you're going to move on now and meet other people that can weave into you in different ways. It's a give and a take system. And so the self is able to let that go and take on the pain from that and move without getting stuck in this place where this person is gone, I want them back, I can't live without them. But no shame, of course. If you're at the end of a relationship and that happens, the mess of being there emotionally and sometimes the depression that comes after that is entirely normal. So even that is part of going with the grain. It's when you get to those moments where you know something isn't going to work and there's nothing that can be done about it, and you refuse to accept that, and you keep grinding away at trying to force something that is happening on its own, something that you can't have any control over. So in those instances, ask yourself, why is it that I am so determined to force this to work? And what you'll find is that the answer to those questions is going to be an ego answer. There's something about your ego that is harmed if you don't get this particular outcome. Okay? So that's one way to tell whether or not you're operating out of self versus ego. The other example that I wanted to use is conformity. There's nothing wrong with conforming to laws and certain social standards every now and again. In fact, it's necessary for survival. The key with conformity, I think, when we're talking about trying to determine whether or not it's being done out of self versus ego, is looking at extremes. When you have someone that is just so rebellious and I'm not going to do this just because everybody else is doing it, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do and fuck what you guys think and fuck the social consequences. And then when you have somebody on the other end that knows that conforming to this doesn't really line up with who they are, and they're doing it anyway out of an anxiety of some kind, both of those are on extreme ends, and extremes are not a part of the self. The self is very much about balance in all instances. So let's use nature as an example. I don't care what ecosystem it is that you wanted to use, pick an ecosystem. Imagine all of the different organisms, plant life and animal life that are in that ecosystem. Imagine the different elements that are in that ecosystem and how all of that interacts to create the ecosystem. If everything in that ecosystem suddenly became just one thing, the ecosystem would vanish. It wouldn't exist. Even in nature, we see that there has to be a variety of different things in order for an ecosystem to survive. Everybody survives because everybody's different. So habitual conformity is something that is definitely part of the ego. And what I'm not saying is you have to, I don't know, be a criminal. It's nothing like that. I'm not saying that you have to go to work and say, fuck you guys, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do whatever I want. Because again, there is a degree of conformity that's necessary. Just like, for example, if there are a species of animal within the ecosystem, that species of animal has to conform to the social order of its own species in order to survive. It doesn't necessarily have to dominate the entire ecosystem, but there does have to be a degree of conformity there in order for survival. And the survival of that species is necessary because it sustains the ecosystem on a grand scale. So look at those two things. Completely trying to assert your individuality at all costs is ego, and relying too heavily on conformity is also ego. And kind of a red flag you can look for with conformity is if you are of the mindset that other people should change to match either your behavior, your perspectives, your ways of thinking, whatever it is, or the perspectives and behaviors and social rules that come with a particular thing, like a job or a religion or a particular culture, if you're in this mindset that everybody needs to conform to that, like not just you, that's also an indicator that you're operating out of ego and not out of self. So again, let's think about somebody that's very rebellious and absolutely has to make themselves an individual and wants to be an outlier in society with the intention of making it clear that they are different from other people and maybe elite or better than other people. So this is something that could probably ring true for type 4s. The control bit that I talked about earlier probably rings true for a lot of type 8s. But when you see people like that, and then you see people that are on the other end that are compulsively conforming, doing it really without thought, it's just like a self-preservation mechanism, if you will. Perhaps like 2s or 6s or 1s or 9s, for example. Great questions in those situations would be, why are you doing those things? And what you're going to find, just like with control, is the answer to those questions doesn't have anything to do with the self. It has to do with the ego. There's something about the breakable part of you that you believe you're protecting when you take this radical stance against, or when you take a compulsive stance to conform. So pay attention to those things, because again, the self underneath of personality type, the self underneath of your Enneagram type isn't breakable. It doesn't need to conform, and it doesn't need to intentionally deviate, because it is what it is and it fits where it fits, and you are going to naturally attract and repel, for lack of a better word, things that line up with you and things that don't line up with you. And that goes for people, it goes for jobs, it goes for life circumstances. And that happens when you can allow yourself to step fully into the real self and put off the ego. I mentioned this in a video, it's probably been several years ago now, but conformity, again, I'm a 6, has always been a struggle for me. It still is now, even though I've gotten to the place after my divorce, kind of going through that process really woke me up and showed me just how stupid it was for me to spend so much of my life conforming. That's why I got stuck in the marriage that I did in the first place, because that's what you did. You have to conform. And I didn't want to disappoint the people that I had in my life, and especially for me, because I had the religious aspect to it as well. The thought process that I had back then was, I don't want to disappoint God, because this is what God wants me to do. So I absolutely would over conform, which for me was a way to protect my ego, because I didn't want to feel like a bad person, and also because I didn't want to be abandoned and rejected, because I thought if I express myself and if I go against the grain here and I try to live the life that I feel like I really, really want for myself, I'm going to be rejected by my family or my church or just the people that I know, or maybe even disappoint my family and my church, because again, there was a lot of social pressure on me at the time to get married and to have a baby especially. My parents and his parents really wanted grandchildren, so I conformed and gave into that pressure. That was an ego thing. That wasn't me operating out of my true self. Also, another thing that I've noticed, jobs that I've taken in the past, I have taken a lot of jobs that I knew, even applying for them, were not a good fit for me at all. The way that I am naturally when I don't have to conform did not align with several of these jobs that I've taken, and those jobs were absolute nightmares. I had to exert so much fucking effort to be not only successful there, but to be happy there, to have any sort of motivation to go to work. And in all instances, those jobs were ones where I just kind of declined in performance over time. And it wasn't because I was a lazy employee, and it wasn't because I wasn't intelligent. It was because I was in a job that required me to think and behave and feel in certain ways that just didn't come naturally to who I am as a person, naturally to myself. And, you know, I'd get written up and I'd get closer to being fired at these jobs, and then I'd quit because I didn't want to be fired. So that's an example of conforming out of compulsion. But again, there are times when it's necessary to conform. Again, it's about balance. The question is it compulsive conforming? Those are things to look for and things to ask yourself. And trying very much to stand out and compulsive conforming are difficult to see in each individual moment. So this is one of those things where you probably want to go look back at patterns of behavior to see if that's something that you tend to lean towards, one way or another on that spectrum. But anyways, those are just some examples of how to tell whether or not you're flowing out of self or out of ego. And I'm going to wrap this up by saying, if you guys don't know, I do life coaching. I'm a certified life coach, certified through the Myers-Briggs organization, but I've also got some Enneagram training as well from a counseling center here in Dallas. I've got my bachelor's degree in psychology with an emphasis in personality theory. I'm currently working on my master's degree in licensed professional counseling. And if you are interested in doing a life coaching session, I offer personality-based life coaching sessions. They are $50 an hour, and I'm going to put a link here on the screen and then also in the bottom. If you are interested in that, you can click on that link and it will take you to my online scheduler. You select the day and the time slot that you want, and it sends me a notification and adds it to my calendar. And then I will get in touch with you and we'll kind of go from there. So this is the first, again, in a series that I'm going to do. This is one that I'm going to put for free on YouTube. I'm going to finish the rest of this series and upload it onto my Patreon account. I have a link down there too as well for my Patreon account if you want to go and join to get access to additional videos and content that I don't put here on YouTube. And yeah, so I'll see you next time. Thanks.